Hello, hello. Today I will be talking about my team's run in the 3v3 event at BIATL this past weekend, where we went undefeated up until the finals, losing to KTOD 2-1, with my game finishing last, being a very close game against Tata and Ray Blue. I also have a video that I released earlier this week that does a deep dive into Talzin Yellow as a archetype, specifically the tempo control version that I played, although there are a lot of other variants that I may go into more in the future. So first, starting off with how we really chose our lineup. This primarily started with, I would say, me wanting to play Talzin Yellow, but saying, like, I will just play whatever the team wants, and that we should find at least one deck that we considered the most powerful to build around. This actually led to us starting talking about playing Han 1 green and Han 2 blue, and then trying to find a third deck, but that ended up being very hard to figure out. There really wasn't a good third deck to slot into that. I think we ultimately came to the conclusion, like, Kylo Tarkentown aggro, Kylo 2 or 3, whatever set, the red one, double red. We were considering other things like CAD losing a bunch of tools, Odd Han losing tools. Just no matter what we chose, it was kind of something losing tools. Gar ECL was a big one, so between Kylo Tarkentown and Gar ECL, those were probably the top two to go with that lineup, but we ended up moving away from it because it just didn't feel great with the third deck choice, and it felt like a lot were riding on the first two. Eric was pretty set on Anakin Datavault as being the best choice out of any decks that could be brought. I had like Han 2 ECL, I had on Han, Odd Han 1 green, Han 2 blue. So we ended up primarily focusing on Anakin Datavault, and then we wanted to choose one villainy deck to go with that. So we were very hesitant on Talzin Yellow because of the matchup spread. It really needs to avoid space decks, but if it avoids space decks, it can be very potent into ground-based strategies. Specifically, Han 1 green and Han 2 blue, it had very high win rates into. And as long as we were able to make it so that Talzin Yellow could sit against those decks as often as possible, it did feel like a very good choice. Going into the event, now looking back, there really wasn't that much Han 1 green, which I'm still very surprised about because that's easily in the top 3 decks, I think, at the moment. So we did end up choosing Talzin Yellow to pretty much focus those two decks. It's also just, again, good against ground control decks, or ground-based decks in general, so like Ray, Data Vault, it is another deck that it's pretty decent into. CAD decks, it's pretty decent into. Quinlan, it was not so great. Like the faster decks, like Quinlan and Sabine, it could be a little more towards 50-50. Sabine used to be a very good matchup, but now that they have Nemec, I go into a lot more about the matchup breakdown for Talzin Yellow in my other videos, so if you want more about that, check out that section of my other video. Some other considerations for to pair with Anakin Datavault were Talzin Red and then a fill deck, or going into something like putting, because Brandon has, Red Dragon has a lot of experience on Kira. We were thinking about letting him play Kira, and then Grumpy on Anakin Datavault, and then me playing a fill deck, which could be Odd Han, which is what we ended up choosing anyways. Kind of agonized about this a little bit. Just we were all a bit stressed out about, like, how do we lock in this lineup. And finally, a few days before the event, we just said we're gonna lock Talzin Yellow. We're gonna lock, obviously, Anakin Datavault was what we were building around, and then Brandon had been practicing a few decks. I had also been all three of us had been practicing decks to try to figure out what the best third option could be, and we felt like Odd Han kind of complemented Talzin Yellow and Anakin Datavault a bit more. Some decks will just fold to space aggro, so we wanted to have a space aggro in our lineup to be able to target things, hopefully. So ended up settling on this. Looking at the matchup spread, I'll be focusing primarily on my matchup spread. I may mention other matchups from my teammates a little bit, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be looking at primarily my matchup spread going through the event. So in the first round, it was Padme Tarkentown, Boba Data Vault, and something else. we felt really confident into all three of them. We didn't really care how we were sat. I ended up just being like, throw me wherever you guys want. I feel decent into all of them except for Boba Data Vault. And I think they ended up sitting first. We got a counter pick, and then we sat two, assuming that no matter what happened, we would be favored in at least two matchups. My teammates won both of their matchups pretty quickly. It was over probably in less than 15-20 minutes, and then my opponent asked if we could finish out the match because he wanted to, so we did. It was a very quick 2-0. This deck is very easy for Talzin Yellow to beat. A 6-flip ground-based leader is normally the kind of deck that Talzin would want to go against. By the time Talzin flips, have control of the ground, and then they flip the turn after into ground control from Talzin. It's pretty hard to deal with. In round 2, I ended up being somewhat of a sacrifice. I don't remember exactly how it ended up being lined up, but we lost the dice roll, and then based on position we were in, we were like, we don't think we can avoid me going into Boba Data Vault, so if they know to put Boba Data Vault against me, I think they didn't necessarily know, it just kind of happened this way. So Boba Data Vault did end up being placed in front of me. I was down 0-1, games were going extremely long. Game 1 I actually did almost win. It went on for a while. I ended up forcing him, not really forcing him, he didn't decklists are blind at this point, but he even said to me on the flip turn, I feel like you really want me to flip into space, and then he flipped into ground, and, well, he was right, I have Bamboozle in my hand. If he had flipped into space, I do think I would have won game 1, but by flipping into ground, pushing a little more damage, it did set him up to have enough to go Ruthless Raider on his flip turn in space, followed by Planetary Bombardment, and that 24 points of damage. I wasn't able to get the Ruthless Raider off the board, and the 24 points of indirect damage, it was just enough to do me in game 1. Game 2, my teammates had already won. It did seem like, again, that it was going to go on for a while. I did actually get him with the Bamboozle in game 2, but he was going to be able to line up into just bomb after bomb in space. He had one Planetary Bombardment in hand, he showed me. He did not want to finish it out, so unlike my round 1 opponent, he did not want to keep playing, and I was fine with whatever he chose, so we ended up not continuing that match. I do think I was in a advantage position, so I think it would have ended up being 1-1 and going to a game 3 if it continued. Round 3, we went against George's team, and George's team was running 3 space decks. It was actually very funny. Right before the round started, I talked to George, and George was like, oh yeah, we're running 3 space decks. We're that lineup. The lineup that's just going to capitalize on people that are weak to space aggro. And funny enough, before the event started, my teammates and I were talking about, is there ever a world where people play even 2 space aggro, or just 2 space decks in general, not necessarily space aggro? And we thought it was pretty unlikely with 2. If it was 2, it would probably be like 1 aggro and 1 rampy, like Boba Data Vault or Piet, and then something like Adhan, some type of aggro deck. So, after I talked to George, pairings go up, we're paired into them, and they have Kazada Yellow, Vonreg Yellow, and Piet Red. So not 3 aggro decks, but 3 space-based decks, 2 of them being aggro, and I was just like, yeah, you can just throw me away. I'll be your sacrifice. I ended up getting the worst matchup of the 3 in Kazada Yellow, and the reason why that's the worst is because I do need Client in some capacity to be able to mitigate some damage. He also was able to play around Bamboozle very effectively. I believe it was with Jam Communications. I forget which discard access he had in his deck. The Von Reg matchup is a lot clearer in my mind because we did replay them in the quarterfinals. More on that later. And Von Reg was the one that I felt the most comfortable into. Crazy match. Can't wait to talk about it. But in this round, yeah, George just ran over me. It was not that close. There was I take that back. Both games, there were lines that I had that could stabilize me, but because I didn't stabilize, they weren't out that close. For example, in game 2, I had gotten past his flip turn. I believe it was with the bamboozle, but he was pushing a lot of damage. I think he had played a light maker on 5 that I had dealt with. And going into 6 resources, I had... Oh no, sorry. Okay, so I had not played bamboozle yet. I delayed his flip. He flipped on 5. I had bamboozle, yellow card, and Anakin on 6 resource turn, and I pitched the yellow card. He had 1 card in hand after taking... Or 2... Yeah, he drew 2 resource... He had 1 card in hand left. And played something, was on 4 resources, which this is obviously cunning resources. And I said, okay, if it's cunning, whatever, I just have to go for it. I discard my card, play bamboozle off his leader, and then it's cunning, and he makes me discard Anakin and gives +4, and, you know, that was over. If I had somehow gotten to play Anakin, so, like, if he didn't have the discard, I think I might have been able to stabilize and then take that game, but it ended up not being that close because of the discard on the Anakin. I finally, playing against, this was Ian Klein's team, Lego Pizza, in round 4, finally got a matchup that I really wanted in Hantu Blue Force. We chose to sit me into it without initiative. I think they chose to sit into me since... Oh, okay, yeah. We sat first. We sat Odd Han. They sat Quinlan Tarkentown into Odd Han, and then we sat me into Hantu Blue without initiative, which initiative is very important there, and we sat Grumpy on Anakin Datavault into Piet, which is a losing matchup. Potentially Quinlan into Odd Han is a losing matchup for Odd Han as well. Brandon, Red Dragon on Hod, ended up winning against Cluis, which was amazing. I think it might have been 2-1. I think it might have been could have been 2-0. I know after the match, he said it was very close. I think he might have bricked a double turn 1 play one game, but he did end up taking it, which was great. Eric, in a counter matchup, he lost, so then it was on me to win my favorite matchup. This went down to 1 minute left in the game, where I finally was able to close it out. Game 1, my opponent did open up with Ogdo Bogdo, which is by far the worst opener for Talzin Yellow to go against when I don't have Drain Essence or Sith Assassin. So, more on how my deck was constructed in the other video, but I did have access to the Sith Assassin. I didn't have it. I did have access to the Drain Essence, I think, in my main deck for the 3v3, and I didn't have it, so he ended up being able to push a lot of damage early. I think I just fully skipped my turn 1, because the Ogdo would have just eaten it. I still almost stabilized in 1, but lost that one. In games 2 and 3, it was Grogu openers from Hantu. I also had the answers to Ogdo both times. One for being on the initiative in game 2, then Ogdo doesn't matter. And in game 3, I was not on initiative, but I had the answer. I believe it was a Sith Assassin. It might have been Drain Essence. But they were not close. Games 2 and 3, I was able to answer the Grogu opener. It is a little nuanced in how to do that. Did get past it. And from there, it's just keep them off the Force, chain enticing rewards to get card advantage on them, deny them the Force so they can't get card advantage back with Kiadi, never really let them get onto the board, and just slowly chip away at them. So that was a very easy matchups in games 2 and 3. The biggest issue was time. Like I said, it ended up finishing with a minute left. Round 5, we were expecting to be able to double draw in round 5 and 6 based on the standings, but we got a pair down into Rebel Resources team. They chose to sit... They sat first. I forget what they sat. We sat Odd Han into it. And then they chose to sit Sabine Yellow into me, which I was pretty okay with. I think no matter what they had, I was like, this is probably around 50-50, if not slightly favored for Talzin Yellow, no matter what they sit in front of me. So I just said, my team, put me wherever you want. This match was absolutely crazy. I had Client on, it was on stream, highly recommend watching it. I had Client every game. On game 3, it was the 4 resource turn play, but in games 1 and 2, it was the 2 resource turn play. In game 1 in particular, I actually punted a little bit because I put a bounty on something and then Talzin's assassined it, to planning to finish it off with Gain the Force and then use the Talzin ability activation to finish it. 4 health Falcon, I think was the Fast Falcon. And he played Han Pilot to put it out of range of the Talzin activation. I was like, oh my god, I have Takedown in my hand. This was silly. I could have sequenced this differently. Because I think it might have even just been bounty something smaller or just lead with Takedown. I should have considered the Pilot. And I think if I did consider that, I probably would have won game 1 and it would have just been a 2-0 match. And then game 3, I didn't have a turn 1, but I had, I think it was a Shinhati Tyrannus curve. And he did open ground, which, great for me. He ended up having a few units in space, but obviously Sabine deploys to ground, so there's always a little bit in ground. And he had another play in ground early on. So, ended up super close. I ended up stabilizing primarily through the Client. It was Shinhati, Client, and then I think Tyrannus on the 5 resource turn. Don't really remember. It was streamed, so they're all there. Very good match to watch. Ended up somehow taking that down even without the turn 1 play. It felt great. A big shout out to Grumpy Elephant for this match. He was helping me pilot after his match finished, and he saw some lines that I didn't see. I was extremely fatigued actually throughout this entire event. I had not been sleeping the prior 2 nights. So having him looking over my shoulder and being able to help me with my games was super relevant throughout the entire day. He also helped a lot in the Han 2 matchup beforehand when his match against Piet had finished. And then round 6, we were able to ID. Then in the top 8 cut, this was super odd. I was very surprised when we ended up playing against Frank's team from Boston Network, and they sat Reflex across from me. Even though we gave them the ability to seat into me, the worst scenario for them was to seat Han 2 Blue into me. I was told that they had tested it and they felt like all 3 of them were good into Talzin Yellow, which just isn't the case. Han 2 Blue is one of, if not Talzin Yellow's best matchup for the tempo control variant, if not every variant. So it was very surprising. They ended up giving us all 3 of our best matchups. I think Oddhan, Red Dragon, ended up losing his matchup. Eric won, Grumpy Elephant won his matchup. And then it was on me to win the Han 2 Blue matchup, which it was a very easy 2-0. I actually, he opened, I believe, Ogdo Bogdo turn 1, and I just had the answer to it this time. And then from there, there was just no chance of the Han 2 winning. They ended up being extremely long and grindy games. I think both of my teammates finished best of 3 games in the time that I had finished basically 1 game. And I do remember leaning over to Eric. Eric was watching for a lot of this, and I just whispered to him in both games pretty early on. It was like 4 or 5 resources. I'm like, this is going to be a long game, but I'm going to win. And then in game 2... it's pretty obvious that I had the win as well pretty early on, like 4 or 5 resources for anybody that did understand that matchup, and I leaned over. I think that might have helped him focus on finishing the end of his game, which was good. I did make a huge punt in game 1 for whatever reason. My brain, this was like 8 a.m. I still had not been sleeping, and Reflex played a Kiati, and I had the Force and Talzin available, and I didn't -1 it, and I just attacked a 4/4 Talzin Assassin into it. And I'm like, I did not deserve to win that game, but it is just so heavily in Talzin Yellow's favor that, you know, we got away with it. So, get past that, then we're into George's team, and we're just like, oh, great. Probably gonna get knocked out. We should have lost to them last time. So basically, this is the third matchup, or no, fourth matchup, where just based on drafting, we should have lost. We should have lost to Ian's team. We should have lost to George's team the first time. Should have lost to Frank's team, and then we should have lost to George's team the second time. And this was crazy. I was so focused, I didn't even notice there was a huge crowd around the table watching this game. I pulled all game one. I think I got run over primarily through it was a yellow card, discard a card from your hand, and look at your opponent's hand, and and then choose a card to discard. He got my bamboozle that way. Game two, he did that again, but this time it enabled Anakin, so I had a client on board, and I was able to get to the Anakin turn, and because either way, like, it was going to put a heroic in my discard, whether I played it or he discarded it, and then Anakin was able to stabilize me. And then game three, I had nothing. I did have client, so actually no, I had client, which is the first step in like getting there, but I did not have anything beyond that. I didn't have bamboozle, I didn't have Anakin. There was like no way that I could see me winning that game, so I bluffed. I took a line where I put a bounty on a unit that only made sense that I would put a bounty on that unit if I had specifically bamboozle takedown. I didn't have either of those cards, but I remember my opponent Crispy stopping, and he had to take such a long time on that turn that the other games ended up finishing. It was 1-1, and now we're the only game going. And has George come over, George sees the same thing, so it's not even like he saw, like, just Crispy saw. George, okay, so like that's probably what he's doing. And I'm kind of smirking at this point, because they're thinking exactly what I wanted them to think. And if this had been like a worse player, I would have probably smirked either way, just because, you know, it's just, I love when things go the direction that they're supposed to go. And if it had been worse players, they probably would have just flipped and not even thought about it, like not even thought about the lines, like what could putting a bounty on that unit mean. And it was a real pleasure being able to play against such skilled opponents that like it was more playing the player than rather playing the game. This was by far my favorite game of Star Wars that I've ever played. So I do that for one round. And then second round, I'm like, okay, I mean, this is the line I'm taking. I'm just bluffing. He didn't end up deploying, and I'm just like, I'm bluffing the bounty onto the unit that I want him to deploy onto, so I did it again. And they're like, okay, well, I mean, they think they can win it without the deploy, so they don't deploy for another turn. They're pushing a lot of damage to base, and I have a healing line in hand because I have my one of top target from sideboard, which was only in my 3v3 pool, not in my 8k pool, into like a Cad Bane on 7. He ends up, or they end up, because they're working as a full team of 3 at this point, finally identifying on the 6 resource turn, I believe, that they had to deploy. Like, this is the moment, like, they got to go for it. It's starting to look a little bad. It's not just clearly, oh, they're just going to be able to keep attacking in space and win. They deploy, and I'm like, I just smile at them. I'm like, I don't have it. And the looks on their faces, it was just great. I loved it. Then from there, now I still had to figure out to win, because they are now pushing the plus leader damage. It's going to be a very tight race. And basically, my team takes a long time now, with Red Dragon on my left and Eric on my right, and we're just like mathing out, like, can we afford to give them initiative? How do we sequence this? Like, it's going to be within one action either way. And it came down to, if they sequence their attacks in a certain way and have a +2 pump, then we lose. But they have to be able to see that and then do the proper sequence towards that and have the +2 pump. So we ended up just deciding to swing out, give them initiative, and put them within a 2-attack lethal with a top target on something that Cad Bane could then come down on the 7 resource turn to capture and heal. There was an alternative line here where we end up claiming earlier and with top target on the same thing, but then we end up putting a bounty on that as well, which is a lot more telegraphed what we're doing, and then capture it for heal of 11. But that one would be a lot easier. If they would still need the +2 pump, but it would be a lot easier for them to see the correct sequence if they took that line. and go to 7. We attack out. We give them initiative. They attack with the wrong unit first, which we were just like, Eric kind of like showboated a little bit, which it was like, Eric, calm down. I think he touched my cards too. I'm like, Eric, don't touch my cards, because you're not allowed to touch your teammates' cards in the 3v3. Only that active player with the deck can touch them, and if a teammate wants to look at them, then I would have to pick them up and spread them out for Eric. And Eric's just like giddy, so happy that because it was clear from that point that we had won. So we just go through the actions. I end up closing it out 2-1, and he ended up having the +2 pump. So they could have won if things were sequenced slightly differently. I don't remember. It wasn't the +2 pump that we were thinking about. It might have been a conditional +2 pump. So like, it was a red card. I don't remember what it was, because it was something newer that I'm not familiar with. So it might not have worked out either way, but I just remember like looking at it and being like, oh my god, they had the +2 pump and they attacked wrong. And yeah, so ended up getting through that one. Shouldn't have. Make it to the finals. And this was, I think it was like a difference of like $50 or something, or $100. And we were just like, I had said going into it, if we get top 2, I'm happy with that. That's my goal. We're going to get top 2. The stars are going to align, and somehow we're going to be sitting in the top 2 table, just like I had been at the last 3v3. I'd got into the top 2. However, there was a little bit of me, because it was KTOD specifically, and against KTOD last time, I had punted. Well, my team had punted. Tyler and I had both had game wins in game 3s that we missed, and that let KTOD win in the last 3v3 in March. So there was a little bit that was just like, man, I do really want to win this, but it was pretty chill. This was a very relaxed finals. I ended up in a very dominant position in game 1 against Tada on Raid Data Vault. It was Chrono on 2 ECL against Brandon on Odd Han. Ophir Wu on Talzin Red against Eric Grumpy Elephant on Anakin Data Vault, and then me on Talzin Yellow against Tada on Raid Data Vault. This was feeling pretty good in terms of the spread. Eric ended up losing his match very quickly. Brandon ended up winning his match very quickly, which I said after that, I was like, okay, you guys are either supposed to both win or both lose, because this matchup is going to literally take forever. Talzin Yellow into Raid Data Vault. Game 1 ended up going longer than both of the other matches combined. Again, similar common theme kind of throughout the day, and went down to almost no cards left in library. I had gotten Tada up to like, he was hovering between 29 and 31 with like restore and being able to push with small amounts of damage. Ended up taking a line at the end that presented 3 damage in space, 3 damage in ground, and Tada had like 3 or 4 cards in hand, and the only out that I could think of was Bo-Katan, because all of my units that could hit had less than 3 health. For whatever reason, I didn't think of Entrenched, even though I knew he had it, for the space unit, into a Sentinel in the ground, which was, he didn't have the Bo-Katan, but he had the Entrenched and the Sentinel in the ground, and I had ended up early claiming and not playing 2 more units. I had a Shinhati and a Tyrannus in hand, with the resources to play them. I just played a Sith Assassin hidden in ground, so hidden so he can't attack it, and then I had a P-38 in space. So he Entrenched, drops the Sentinel, and that was that. He ended up getting game 1 because I couldn't come back from there. He had a lot of restore, a lot of ground units. I think he like pretty much brought me to death within 1 wave of ground attacks. What was interesting about that game is I was just in such a dominant position over the early turns, primarily through Hotshot Blaster. I had all 3 Hotshot Blasters, although those could have been subbed out for Power of the Dark Sides to similar effects, making me have less power on my units, but more health. And by the time he flipped his Ray, I was like +2 units on him, or +3 units on him, and I just couldn't convert it. It did feel like, okay, the biggest thing is I wasn't drawing my top end at the right time, and because I wasn't drawing my top end at the right time, it did give him this window to come back into the game. Game 2, he bricked his turn 2 and his turn 3, so he just ended up scooping very early. And then game 3, I bricked my turn 2, so, or my turn 1. I think game 3 I bricked it was either my turn 1 or turn 2, and ended up on the back foot because of that. And this is not a matchup that that Talzin Yellow can afford to be on the back foot. If Talzin Yellow is in the dominant position, it normally just converts because it never lets Ray establish anything, especially with the later flip leader and being a ground-based deck. If they do get to the late game bombs and just can chain bomb after bomb after bomb, there is a chance. But the issue there is they tend to just run out of cards and just don't have, like, they have to just like draw like 4 or 5, maybe get away with like 3 bombs in a row and have actually gotten there to win. But because I had missed my turn 1, which put me on the back foot, obviously Ray gets there. Ended up being a very long game, but I was never really in it. And we eventually just scooped, I think around like the 9 or 10 resource turn. So my entire team playing that together. So it was a lot of fun. Very happy with getting second here. It's what I wanted to accomplish going into it. I do wish, since it was against KTOD, that we had been able to get first and get that revenge for last time. So now KTOD is the 2-time first place in 3v3 at BIATL, and McClunky is the 2-time second place. But at least my teammate Philip is now the 2-time winner in the solo event, so we got that one going for us. Then to briefly talk about my Pool 1 and Pool 2, I knew going into this that space was going to be bad. We hadn't really been able to figure that out with the tempo control version, if just the color combination with Talzin in general. So I was like, I don't think people are going to be that high on space. Maybe BIATL, but like BIATL, there's no, it was, the thing is, it was very played last set, and it shouldn't have been. But I'm like, okay, maybe people have gotten the picture by now, and I'm not going to hit the BIATL. BIATL Red, yes, it won, like, had won one event prior, but it's not that good of a deck, like, in terms of what the field should be, like the Han 1s, the Han 2s. Like, there's not really a reason to be playing that deck, so I'm like, okay, like, maybe this is a very high-skilled event. This is probably one of the, like, aside from, like, Galactics, this is probably one of the highest skill level events that occurs in the game. So I'm like, okay, like, people are gonna be off of Sabine, people are gonna be off of space. It should be like Han 1, Han 2, which it kind of was, but not what I expected. It ended up being Han 1 Blue, which they didn't end up doing that well, because Han 1 Blue, you just can't outvalue the green heroic decks, and like the Han 2 Blues with the Kiadis, so it's just like, that was a bit odd. It's like, why aren't you on Han 1 Green? I guess people were feeling not great on it. So Cad Blue, round 1 and Pool 1, very easy matchup for me. Kind of doing the same thing that I'm doing. They can hit both arenas though, but in the ground I'm just so much better. And then I have enticing rewards, which most Cad Blues, if any, are not going to be on. And then I also have the double Avenger, 3 Avenger after side, which a lot of Cad Blues are not on. So this was a very easy matchup. Then round 2, I hit my teammate, the only 1-0 odd Han at the event. There's like 1 or 2 others, but they both lost round 1, and almost beat him game 1 with a client curve, and he just goes, I'm not going to deploy on 5 resources. I'm like, oh great, he's got the Syntha. Not only did he have the Syntha, but he had Ferocity Syntha with the resources, because the Ferocities give you 2 more odd things as they're played. And it's only a 1 attack unit because I contained his space arena well enough and like kept my life down with client. But now he has a 10 attack leader unit, and I don't have Bamboozle. And if I had the Bamboozle, it would have been over to just pull that stuff off, I think. Or if he just didn't have any one of those 3 pieces, I would have won the race because I had been pushing damage and ground. Super close game. But he ended up taking game 1, and then game 2 just wasn't that close. He did his thing, and I did not hit my line to interact with it, and it was just over. Then round 3, I'm against Han 1 Blue. He chose, even though he had a 3-drop, he chose not to play it turn 1. I also had bricked my turn one, so we both were down to turn one, which I was very happy that he didn't choose to place. I don't really know why he didn't. I didn't ask after the game, but he did tell me he had one. So that ends up being an extremely grindy game, going basically to deck out, but I do have the better late game and the better like post flip turn. I am the stronger deck, so he was never really able to get back into it, and I just kept removing everything he played and then ended the game. And then games 2 and 3, he hit his high roll line. He had resource down turn 1 into like a Ventress, I think, both games. It might have been something else. Resource down turn 1 into a ground unit, into discard a power, so he has the villainy and bin, into chert on 4 resources, and then with having gained the force and me not able to interact with it, protecting the unit that he had played before. And then on the flip turn, I'm flipping Talzin, and he had Anakin both games. He's putting resource down, playing Anakin, having binned a villainy on turn 1, making Talzin into an 0-1 both, and I'm just like, okay, you have Chirrut, Anakin, and even then, I still had been grinding against him and like making it go longer, but just never really getting board control back. Now he's in the position, removing all my stuff as I play it. Still almost stabilized, but he has 2 or 3 Anakins game 1 and 3 Chirruts game 1 after the crazy opening line, and then game 2, it's the same thing. Sorry. Game 2, it's the same thing, and he has 2 Chirruts that game and 2 Anakins that game, and I'm just like, okay, like this, I can't beat this, sadly, and my run was over, I was out. Pool 2, Saba Yellow, ground-based deck, very easy for me, 2-0 it. It was not close. My opponent was smiling, but like he was like Tony from Late Night Gaming, very nice guy. He was clearly frustrated, but he was very humble and nice about it, and super nice guy. It was a pleasure to play against. It sucks that he pulled me round 1, and then I go 1-2 drop. Like, is what it is though. And then I have Piet Red Craw from Boston Network on round 2. And he hits the turn 2 ramp into Ruthless Raider, Fulminator, game 1, and then game 2 was like turn 2 ramp, Ruthless Raider, Devastator, I believe, because he had the flip down to be able to get the reduction of 2. And I'm just like, okay. I still almost won game 2, so I had Constructed Saber in my sideboard, which I didn't have in the 3v3 event, and ended up just trying to race. He did have Invisible Hand, so he has the ability to dig for the droid that defeats a non-unique upgrade, so, like, it probably wasn't going to connect, and he did have the upgrade hate, so it ended up not connecting, but there was a chance there that in game 2, after I sided in the Constructed Saber, if he whiffed the upgrade hate, that I would have been able to close, but he had it. And then the final round, I hit, I think, the one live. There was like 3 Boba Data Vaults. There was like one that was 1-1. The other ones were both dead already. And he hits ramp turn 2. Doesn't matter that I bamboozle him. He goes, similar to the one in the team event, he goes Ruthless Raider, ramp into Ruthless Raider on 6, planetary. And I'm just like, okay, I just die. I can't stop this. And game 3, he goes ramp turn 2, Ruthless Raider on 6 into planetary bombardment into Devastator, and I'm just like, that's it. I can't interact with this well enough. Like, I'm just dead. I bamboozled them both games. Did not matter. So those matchups are very, very rough for this deck, but like I said, I was not expecting them. And then looking at the data that was published to Swoobase after the fact, I was so well positioned. I was extremely well positioned in both of these pools, and I hit like the 1 of 1 odd Han, my teammate, in pool 1. There were a few more Han blues than I would have liked. There were a few more Piet reds than I would have liked, but there were a lot of Han 2 blues. There were Han 1 greens. There were Sabines that I'm fine with. Although the Nemec opener can be a little hard now. The Sabine yellows, which I'm very fine with. Like, any light space deck or like deck that's doing both arenas feels pretty good for this, with the leader that deploys into the ground. Kira is also a deck, because like I go into the matchups in the other video, but basically it comes down to I just low rolled my matchup super hard here, and my opponents had really good lines in their matchups, which it feels bad, but it is what it is. That's playing a card game where, opponents can, it's a very wide meta and don't know what you're going to hit. So overall, I was very happy with this deck. I'm very happy with second. I am considering continuing to play the deck in the future. There are other decks that I'm considering, like the McClanakin deck, Anakin Data Vault, that my team went with. Like, if you take out the mirrors, they had like 90% win rates on the deck throughout the weekend in the 8K, so Anakin Data Vault's definitely up there for me. On one green, my teammate Philip winning the event with it is one of my top choices. Odd Han and Han 2 ECL, so may stick on this, may switch to like a tempo version or a more control-y version. I think tempo control is where I want to be, or may play one of those decks. But overall, very happy with this deck. Even though the pools didn't go well, I had a lot of fun. Probably would play it again, even in these pools, just because they were, I think, so well positioned. I just got unlucky in the matchups. So, yeah, looking forward to next time. Maybe it'll be with Talzin Yellow. Thank you for watching. If you like this, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I am interested in making more content. If there is engagement, I will be doing my best to get videos out on a regular basis. May the cards be with you, and have a great day.